So yeah, like I said, I finished watching the show yesterday. I rewatched all the Karate Kid movies in February, and then I dove straight into Cobra Kai. So I was watching one episode a day until yesterday.
That's
So
a lot.
Amazing.
Had you
Just-
seen the show before then, or was this just
no, this was
okay?
my
So
first time diving
awesome.
diving into diving into Cobra
You,
Kai.
you
Had
had
you
the
seen the
full
movies?
experience. That's amazing.
Yeah, I saw the movies when I was a kid. I love all three movies, and the first one actually was a very foundational moment in my appreciation of cinema. But I never got around watching the show. But now that the movie's coming out, I was like, okay, well, this is the perfect time for me to check it out, and it was just incredible. Honestly, the best part of my day since February was sitting down watching an episode of Cobra Kai every single day. It was just amazing. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Glad to hear that.
So the first episode of the show is called Ace Degenerate, and the last episode of the series is called Ex Degenerate. It begins and ends with Johnny, right? First, he's at the most rock bottom he's ever been, and at the end of the show, he's become the number one karate champion in the world. Was it always the case when you guys were developing the series that in its early stages the show would begin and end with Johnny in this almost full circle moment, or did that come sort of later down the line as more seasons began to develop?
Oh, it was 100% the plan from the very beginning. I don't know if we knew definitively that he would be fighting on the world stage exactly with that, but we always wanted to bring it back to, the red mats at the All Valley tournament and give him a chance at, ultimate redemption, give him that second chance in life, but this time with Daniel LaRusso as his, partner as opposed to his adversary, with the two of them as friends. And that was sort of the overarching goal. And with Johnny having grown and become the best version of himself, as opposed to who we saw at the beginning of the series, who was very funny, but the worst version of himself.
And it's also interesting also to see in that episode, the way that it begins when he visits his mother's grave. He's at the most rock bottom he's ever been, and then when he goes back, he's attained a level of success. And obviously the picture with him and his family is quite poignant as well.
Yes, well, that was again with that final episode, because it had been so long since people had seen him in that first episode. We thought it would be a good idea to give them a reminder of just how far he's come.
And and I apologize if there's any background noise. There's some renovations going on.
You're not hearing
It's
anything.
Hear
yeah,
anything?
okay, great. It's really interesting to watch the show like this from beginning to end, because you can clearly tell that some seasons track the beginning of the story, the middle, and the end, and you're also not leaving a stone unturned and paying off basically every single arc that was built up for the past 5 seasons. And I'm wondering if it's kind of difficult to figure out the best ways to ensure that each character that the audience has grown to love not only has their chance to be in the spotlight again for one last time, but also pay off their stories in a satisfying way.
Beginning in season one, we always had cards on the wall for, in a micro and macro way in terms of, any episode that's in progress. Obviously, we have various outlining going on. But from the beginning, as we were starting to introduce, more characters and kind of feed the writer's room the soap opera of like, oh, and this person is going to end up, disappearing for 3 episodes, but coming back here, and they're going to have a win here. And, it became obvious that we needed to start tracking that, in a way that made sure we didn't lose any thread. So literally in season one, and definitely going forward, we started just having a character wall, that would track just the beats for, any given character, whether series regular or, more ancillary, going from episode 1 to episode 10, or in the case of the final season to episode 15, to see like what is the journey and where are the moments. And by looking at that wall, sometimes you start to feel, are we away from this person too long? Have we dropped a thread? Ooh, this thread now has pulled in this character, and you start beautiful minding it a little bit. And we've always talked about it like an orchestra, and it's a symphony. There's movements, you have the timpanis, and everyone's banging on, chimes and everything when people are punching and hitting each other. And then you have your little, flutes and piccolos section, where you want something a little lighter, and everything in between. So it was intentional, and we looked at, you know, shows in an aspirational way, like Game of Thrones, and going back 25 years to HBO's Oz, as ways where you had, you know, shows with very strong front and center protagonists that could have entire episodes where they were being more supportive or even more in the background, to another rising stakes story that you didn't expect. And looking at it, you know, from that kind of dramatic construct actually helped us tell the tightest version of that kind of story.
And like you guys have said, you know, one of the most significant turning points of the series is Daniel fully embracing Cobra Kai at the end, which is kind of unexpected because for the bulk of it, it's always just, you know, Miyagi-Do, and Miyagi-Do has to take down Cobra Kai, and that's it. But, you know, he begins to realize that perhaps there's not just one way of doing karate, and there may be good in both Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do, because after all, one of the core tenets of Miyagi-Do is balance, right? So how did you want to develop this sort of aspect of Daniel's arcs where he realizes that, you know, in Johnny's hands, perhaps Cobra Kai may actually do some good for the valley?
Right. Yeah. I think, you know, for Daniel, you know, a running theme in his story is, you know, overcoming the trauma of his past. And the thing is, you know, his childhood ended with a happy ending as he entered into adulthood. And that's why he became like generally successful. And it's not until Cobra Kai comes to town that really like, you know, there's a new wrinkle in his life that he needs to iron out. And part of that is looking back at the past, not just in a black and white way, because now he's an adult and, you know, he can understand things about Johnny that he didn't know when he was a kid. And so that opens his mind, not just to, you know, the people, but the philosophies themselves. And it's, you know, we're always trying to find the balance, like in Miyagi-Do, of, you know, a character who is staying true to who he is while recognizing there's someone who has a different mode of life that they could totally disagree with, but it works for them. And I think that that was a realization. And through that, you get over the, you know, the fear of snakes, essentially.
And I somehow never thought that they were able to do Cobra Kai, you know, train their kids to Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Do at the same time. So that was kind of cool to see at the end.
Yeah, well, that was something that, you know, I think that, you know, one of the things that we've sort of, worked through in the writers' room all these seasons is seeing the good, you know, the good within each philosophy, and I think that that's what, and it, you know, sort of it's, you know, reflective of the world that we live in, just in general. Like, you know, we live in a really, you know, divided world where sometimes people are very like tribalist, and it's like, you know, they believe this, and the other side is the enemy with things, when at the end of the day, most people in life are going through life, you know, with positive intentions, but with the belief system that they were brought up with, and you know, there's good in both. And if you strip away viewing Cobra Kai as the enemy or Miyagi Do as the enemy, and just actually like learn a little bit about each other and learn a bit about the intentions and learn about, um, you know, uh, you know, why, you know, a person may, you know, embrace a certain kind of karate, then maybe there's some element in it that can help you, and that, you know, that they're not so crazy, and even if it's not for you, you understand why it's for them. So it was just sort of something that, by the end, I think both these guys recognize that, like, okay, there's like, you know, for at certain times Miyagi Do is the right way, and in certain times Cobra Kai is the right way in life. And it's good to, if you have all the tools in your toolbox, then you can pick and choose when to use them.
And it's also interesting to see in this series is seeing people's side of the story as to why they wanted to join Cobra Kai in the first place. Like Kenny's a great example of this. You know, we get to see his life before he joined Cobra Kai, and it's very difficult. And so for him, it's only natural that he would want to be in Cobra Kai and you know, become a stronger person to stand up to his bullies, but he becomes something that he does not want to be. Was that important for you all to showcase, you know, that The people that join Cobra Kai are first and foremost fundamentally human and have their own reasons for being there?
Definitely. I mean, the whole journey, for Johnny's character especially, is the coping with and wrestling with the lessons of Cobra Kai, looking at it as, the answer to, what these kids need in today's society, and then being smacked in the face with the reality that, like too much medicine, can be an overdose. And obviously, in the wrong hands, a lesson can go too far, and you start to see what Cobra Kai is under Kreese and what Cobra Kai is under Silver. And we had Johnny in season 2 start to kind of get to a place where he was really questioning, the credo on the wall, and especially the no mercy. That's a lot of it, distills down to that. And just as he's kind of like wrestling with that and trying to figure it out, the rug gets pulled out from underneath him in 900 different ways. Kreese takes over, Miguel falls, his relationship falls apart. Everything, comes crashing down, and it takes, multiple seasons for him to get back to a place where he's even willing to look at that wall again in a, inquisitive way, and ultimately gets back to that same place and has the answers because of everything he went through. But yeah, that was very important for us, rather than just to say like Kreese is bad, Silver's bad. It's to show, well, why are they bad? Like, because some of what they're saying actually, seems like it's coming from a good place. Like, yes, I want to teach you strength. I want to teach you to be a winner. I want to show you that you're not going to be stepped on by this world. All positive things, but if taken, as a strict black and white, I'm only going to take that, and I'm not going to allow any other light into that, equation. We wanted to kind of see the results of that.
And bringing back Terry Silver was such a great decision for this series. He's such a good character. I really like the Karate Kid 3. I think he brings such a great dimension to that movie. And when he shows up at Miyagi-Do's lawn, and I think it was in season 4, if I remember correctly, with Kreese, you can tell just, the dimension that he adds to the rivalry with Daniel is just so great. And in the last season in particular, I thought his arc was just fantastic, because he's, for the first time in a long time, he's completely powerless because he cannot control his fate, because he's riddled with an incurable disease. And that makes him even more intimidating, because he'll basically do literally anything to climb at the top one last time, as we saw when he was plotting to kidnap, I think, Carmen and her daughter in the yacht. I'm wondering, like, in terms of mapping out his arc, and especially in the 6th season, like, what did you want to approach the character? Like, how did you guys want to approach the character one last time and put him in like a far more vulnerable position than he was in before?
Um, I'll answer that, but first, as you were talking, I have to say I kept thinking, and underneath all of that is just the meta craziness of having Thomas Ian Griffith, this villain from Karate Kid 3, just back into the world and doing things again. Like, just as a piece of pop culture, it's like usually something that happens in like the 3rd entry of something that didn't like take in a big way, like just kind of fizzles out. And he hadn't been acting in a while, and that was just something that was like all of a sudden Karate Kid 3 energy being thrust back into the 2020s was just a fascinating pop culture in general. But I feel like with, part of that for us, and this was the show itself, we loved how we delved into Johnny's story in a really heartfelt way. There was a kind of a meta comedy for us that, like, hey, the villain from Karate Kid 1, we're like, giving the Breaking Bad treatment. So when, Terry Silver enters this world, we're thinking about it in like Breaking Bad terms. We're like, hey, you know what? Breaking Bad, when, in season 4, when, I forget the name of the El Pollo Loco. What's it? Yeah, Gus.
Gus Fring, yeah.
Yeah, when Gus Fring enters into it, it just takes the show up a notch. And I think that that's kind of what we did with Terry Silver entering this world. The stakes get higher, and it leads into a sword on size fight at the end of season 5, with the fate of the valley at stake. I mean, we took it to that level, and then I think we wanted to just kind of like let that be dead, like Freddy Krueger in a grave, but like we know that that's going to come back at some point, and just bring things back to earth, in the start of the sixth season, and remind everyone where the characters are at, and then as they get into the world tournament, that's when Freddy Krueger jumps out, and and you give him absolutely no reason to show any mercy, because he's on this earth for a short period of time. He feels like he's going to hell anyway, no matter what he's going to do, and so he just wants to ruin their lives. And that is pure Terry in Karate Kid 3. And what's fun is we slowly earned it along the way, just by being on his journey from like a guy who in the start of season 4 was just kind of getting his life together and trying to forget about the past, and then just gets like sucked in like an old addict. Kind of, I don't know if you saw Sam Rockwell in the most recent season of White Lotus, but like his character kind of has like a similar kind of just like, the addict who lets go and goes crazy. And so we just wanted that bigness for the final episodes.
And I really like the Karate Kid 3. I don't know why it gets such a bad reputation. I rewatched it actually, before Cobra Kai, and I really like also how you acknowledge the fact that people have some of the issues with Silver's character. Like, hey, why did this guy actually clear the schedule for revenge in the third movie?
It's cocaine.
Yeah.
And I think the most interesting part actually of the third Karate Kid film is how it examines Kreese, and I think lays the foundation of our understanding of the character when he returns in Cobra Kai. Because I think, as I understood him, for him the world is a battlefield, and basically everyone that's against him is an enemy that must be defeated with no mercy. But after Kwan's death, he has a change of heart and suddenly feels genuine remorse for what he's done to Tori and especially Johnny. And that final scene that Johnny has with Kreese is just truly, truly outstanding. And so, like, how did that specific moment come about? And were there different ways that this scene was developed into the season?
First of all, the Kreese journey, I'll just say, is something that we're as proud of as we are with the Johnny journey. It's like he was just evil in the Karate Kid, and Karate Kid 3, to your point, gave us a little bit more of a history there, and we really expanded upon that on the show. From, we have many flashbacks of young Kreese and young Silver, and you see that Kreese was like a kid who, had good in his life, and some really dark stuff was going on in his life, and he was he kind of had the wrong mentor, had the wrong teachings, and leaned into them in as hardcore way as possible. um and it's something that, like, he's always had a little bit of that goodness within him in trying to help Johnny way back when, but he couldn't handle Johnny's defeat. And trying to help Tori. You see these glimpses of his goodness throughout the show, but it's something that he's always pushing down because he views it as weakness. And when you meet Master Kim in this final season, and you get to see, Kim Sun Young, and you get to see, like, just how, like, where his belief system came from, and the and Master Kim puts him back in that student role, where now he's truly embracing the darkness. We saw the darkest kind of version of Kreese all season, and then for him to see his student, he really mentored Quan. He, like, brought out the quote unquote best in him, and the best in him led to his demise. And it was it was that moment that woke Kreese up, that made him realize that, perhaps, he took those teachings to an extreme and lost himself along the way. So we've known since the beginning, since we brought Kreese onto the show, that we were going to want to have a scene like that scene between Johnny and Kreese, where they finally, where Johnny's able to vulnerably say how much Kreese hurt him, and Kreese is able to genuinely express remorse in a way where it's not that typical Kreese, scene is, expresses remorse or whatever, and then when the back is turned, the camera sees on Kreese's face that he's still evil and like or that he's manipulating. This is pure Kreese, Kreese has come around the other side, and we wanted the ultimate, you know, if Kreese can't have a full, true redemption in every single way, we wanted him and Johnny to make peace, for him to truly say he's sorry, and then obviously the yacht fight was where we were headed. We didn't know it was going to be a yacht necessarily. That's the one scene that we didn't know exactly how it would be, but we knew that we wanted we wanted Kreese to sacrifice himself selflessly for Johnny's benefit, and without Johnny even knowing, just that he was doing it because it was the right thing to do and to protect his quote unquote son.
Is it difficult to map out a character's redemption, not just for Kreese, but also I think Tori. I think Tori has the best arc of the entire season for me, because she starts out as a fairly ruthless, antagonistic figure to Sam, but as we learn more about her and see how difficult of a life she has, we do sympathize with her like Amanda does, and then at some point, she really opens herself up in those last episodes. Is that difficult to sort of track that development from season to season?
It's actually easier to do that with a character that kind of enters the story with more flaws. When you have a character like Tori who comes in and she's got aggression, and she's kind of the quote unquote bad girl, who immediately is butting heads with Sam in season 2, and Sam we only know is just pure good-hearted LaRusso energy. It gives you more places to go because there's more to flip and there's more to undo. Sometimes it can be harder to make sure that you're having a juicy enough arc for a character that is your moral compass, because if they already know right from wrong and they're already generally having a good barometer with how they make decisions, you have to find the truth in how you're getting them off balance to put them in a position where their flaws are coming more to the surface. But when you have a flawed character, or a character that is experiencing hardship, as Tori is from the beginning, with everything happening in her personal life, it just builds sympathy, empathy, rooting interest. You want to see that character have a win, and you're craving that moment where they can start to see either the error of their ways or start to see a way of climbing out of a hole. And it's not simple, but the tools are more kind of laid out on the table in front of you, and you don't have to go digging for them as much.
Now, of course, the show is filled with references from the films, and there was one thing that I was waiting to happen, and I didn't really know when you guys were going to do it, but you actually saved it for the last episode, which was the song "You're the Best" in the training montage with Johnny and Daniel. Was that always the case, that song was going to be specifically used for the series finale?
No, that was just one of the callbacks that we knew would have a big impact, and you're just wondering what the right moment is. And I would say, like, in the early seasons, we were hesitant to use it just because it actually had been overused and like even before we even started the show, it was every single Karate Kid sketch on SNL, or on the talk shows, or they would, like, I think Goldberg's did a Karate Kid episode. They'd always use the best around, so it kind of did.
It felt like parody anytime you saw that song back for a long stretch of time.
Yeah, so I think but as the seasons went on, it became the type of thing that was like, actually, no, and now now we've earned a moment where this could feel like it could be big, and we knew that we wanted it in the context of, a final fight or a final tournament, and then, just kind of um, uh, became like, hey, it's the final montage in the valley, and let's get them all like running down Ventura Boulevard. That'd be the worst thing in California, like traffic history, is all of a sudden, some sort of Rocky run and chase down the street, but it just felt like it came at the right place and just hit in the right way and gave that energy, for our final episode. And of course, we also had the fly with chopsticks was something that was a really big reference that was, it wasn't necessarily, oh, we're going to wait until the final episode to do that. It was just one of those things that we knew was a, a big callback that we could bring back, and we didn't want to force it. And, but by the last season, it's like, okay, well, is there a place for it? And then we loved the Johnny Daniel, kind of post script scene and having, giving that one last callback there, which was, a big one.
When you basically have to come up with a montage at the end of the last episode that sees the characters go in their separate journeys, what did you all want to specifically, highlight as all protagonists that we've grown to love and attach ourselves with become a new begin a new chapter in their life? Sorry.
Yeah, I think for us, we were going for that big, warm 80s ending, which was it was a happy ending. I think like, it's these characters are going to be okay. There's been a lot of drama in the valley for the last, 65 episodes, and people are emotionally connected to these characters. We're emotionally connected to these characters. And we wanted the lasting impression to be that they're going to be all right. And it was really fun making that montage because you're taking all these characters that we've given so many ups and downs to give them to their fulfilling conclusions that are also feel like the start of the next chapter for them.
So now that you've released 6 seasons of Cobra Kai that were all flawlessly executed, by the way, they were just fantastic. You've reignited a love for the Karate Kid franchise. It's now continuing with a movie coming out next month, and have created basically a whole new fan base of people who fell in love with this franchise through your show. I'm wondering, like, what would you all say was the most rewarding part of creating Cobra Kai, bringing it to life, and seeing the reactions that it received all over the world from fans of all generations and ages?
There's so many rewarding aspects. I mean, from the beginning, it was incredibly rewarding to have the validation that there was a giant fandom out there, waiting for this show the way that we imagined there would be. For us, Karate Kid was on the same level as Star Wars for, us as, little kids in the early 80s, devouring, everything that came to the cinema. And in terms of, movies that we rewatched again and again, when we got VCRs and eventually DVD players, Karate Kid was just always in heavy rotation, and it had so many themes that felt timeless, and there was that excitement of showing it to your kids, and everything about that first launch was validating. And then the ability to tell as long a story as we did was something that felt like rarefied air, and not taking for granted that that can ever happen again. To be able to make 65 episodes of anything in today's environment is takes a high wire act. And in our case, it took the collapse of one streaming platform scripted division, a pandemic, a lot of different things went into, how we made 6 seasons of this show. And being able to leave it all on the table and tell the complete story that we envisioned in our heads back when we were, putting this together in 2016, 2017, to look back on it and say, like, we didn't have any big card on the wall that, we weren't able to do that one. We got the rug pulled out from underneath us, or we couldn't figure out how to pull that together. I mean, we've blown up Vietnamese villages. We've blown up yachts. We've had multiple all valley tournaments. We've had international tournaments. We've had every kind of brawl you can imagine, with people falling from, all sorts of heights. We played the tears, the laughs, the fist, pumps, and everything, and the goosebumps and everything in between. So it was just rewarding to to be able to deliver that, to connect with this fandom that that is essentially an extension of who we are as a fandom of this of this franchise, and be able to kind of count all of those characters that we met in those first 3 movies as close friends now, in terms of the legacy characters, and watch this whole generation of young kids grow up on the show and step into the next phases of their careers. It's an endless list of things that we're thankful for.
Awesome. Well, it was great talking to you all, Jon, Josh, and Hayden on Cobra Kai. Congratulations again. The show has been fantastic. The past 3 months watching it has been truly, truly, truly incredible. I can't wait for the movie, and I hope you have a very good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.